Make that motion.
Okay, motion by Luck, seconded by Carol. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, approval of previous minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Melissa. I can second that. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Clint, by the way, for taking minutes. So we kept a lot of the same agenda items as last time and added a couple more to kind of cover some of the conversations that we might have. So looking at number 5, discussion and possible action on strategic priorities and values. We already approved, I think, our final list of those, but I think this is still on here as far as discussing when or what we want to send to the department heads to get further response from them. So I'm open to some discussion on that. I guess I would just say I personally think we need to kind of finish going through this document and editing to get a better idea, perhaps, of what we want to get from them. But we also don't want to wait forever. So if you guys have a different opinion, let me know.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
As you know, I agree with that. I think that I think we want to be very mindful of their time, and so I think we should make sure that we have a pretty clear understanding of what we're asking. And I think that's something that we should keep in mind, though, every meeting as we're going through this document. I think we should keep in mind, like, what are questions that we have that department heads could help us clarify. But I would say that we want to make sure that we have some sort of target date for sending out that, so that it doesn't get off our radar. So maybe like mid-October or something, we should plan on trying to have some kind of document ready to go out to the department heads. And I agree. I think having this document, kind of having gone through all of the document as it's written right now, will help us, I think, clarify what we're asking from the department heads. So I think we should be able to get through this by hopefully before mid-October, and then be able to clarify our questions for the department heads.
Yeah, I think so too. Steve?
So it sounds like we're also probably going to need to meet again in a couple of weeks or something.
I think that was the plan, unless I hear objections from the rest of you as committee members, that until we get a further along in this, we're probably going to need to meet about bi-weekly, because if we're really trying to get this to the board by December, which I know we mentioned was a rather lofty goal, but I still want to keep that in mind, then we have to make progress. And it took us the whole meeting to get through section 1 last time, and we still need to discuss some of those final edits on that one. So, okay, if I don't have any objections, welcome, Steve. Hi. Then we'll just move on. We'll leave that on the agenda and move on to number 6. So in our folders, MIS added Melissa's edits that she did from our last meeting to section 1. Clint, are you able to pull that up for us?
We can't hear you, Clint, just so you know. Your microphone looks like it's supposed to be on, but we can't hear you.
While he's working on that, I'll just mention, when we get done with this one, the other sections of this are in our previous month's meeting folder. So when we go on to section 2, you'll just need to pull it up if you're doing it on your iPad from the last meeting. Our very first folder has like chapter 2, which is our strategic goals. There it is. Thank you, Clint. I hope we can hear you though soon. All right, so Melissa, I guess if you just want to would you like to add anything or tell us? I don't know, are these comments, I guess my question was, are these comments new from our last meeting?
So these comments are in there because we didn't actually answer them in the last meeting, so I left them in there. So I went back through and listened to our entire last meeting to try to make sure I captured everything we talked about. And I noticed that we didn't actually answer these commented questions that are in these comments, so I left them in.
Okay,
And some of them are not necessarily a part of like the first one talking about should we see a strategic plan for Richland Center or other communities. That isn't necessarily something we have to include right here in this plan, but it does seem like we should be mindful of what strategic plans are out there in our communities to see how they might integrate with our strategic plan. But I'm not quite sure what we do with that. I think Supervisor Carroll, I think, was the one that brought this up initially. So he may have more comments on that.
I'm trying to find
oh, okay,
a spot where I was going to ask a question.
okay. Are there any of these comments, Melissa, that you think we need to address right now as far as in this meeting on these edits? Or are these things that maybe once we're further along, we come back and look at them again?
Yeah, I think that's okay. I mean, I don't think any of them, at least these first two, I don't think are anything that has to be addressed right now. So we could just come back and potentially we could leave comments throughout all three sections. And once we have it all kind of figured what we want, then we can come back and address some of these other questions.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Comment 3, though, I noticed there's the org chart in
Yeah,
our folder.
it looks like Clint already asked them to do that, so that's great. 'Cause
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I didn't think, as an individual supervisor, I wasn't comfortable going to zoning and saying, "Hey, I need you to make this org chart." But he's their supervisor, so it makes perfect sense that he did that, and I think it looks pretty good. Mr. Langrick, can you hear us? We hear you yet?
Can you hear me on
Yes,
on this?
yay.
Yay. So you had some comments on the how the org chart turned out from the one that they produced from our zoning department.
Yes, it's a little bit different than what you're going to see with Iowa County, and I can pull that up so you can kind of see what I'm referencing here. One second. Share. So in right now you're looking at the Richland County one put together. The difference that we don't quite mirror with Iowa County is, you'll remember Iowa County kind of underneath their committees, the standing committees, they kind of roll with, I believe, 5 or 6 kind of their bigger standing committees. And then the elected officials and the subcommittees and the county departments and contracted agencies kind of all fall then in those same major pillars of services. Ours is essentially more of a flatter type of an organization. We don't quite have the same type of arrangement underneath the standing committees. We still operate with more independent committees. So this is kind of the vertical scheme here that you see that was put together, and thank you for the folks with zoning and land information for putting this together. You'll see that it's kind of it's not quite in the same kind of configuration by those different facets of service. But other than that, we have listed on here then the breakdown of where folks fall by the categorization that you see on the left. Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Clint, and thank you to zoning. I really like it. I guess the question that we had on, or the comment that was on our edits was then, now that we have this, do we include it within the structure itself or as an addendum?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I personally, I like it in there. I think it's a really good visual that can help people understand how complicated county government is, and how many different things we're involved with. So, but I mean, if you want to put it as an addendum too, I that's fine too. But my thought is to leave it in the text.
Question. Do we have the original report from Troy in our folder anywhere? That you presented to the board? I'm having trouble finding it.
I don't think it's in our folders for this particular meeting. I know he emailed it to us and it was in a different folder. I don't remember. Does anyone remember where that is?
Anyway, what my question, this is, I guess, a question for Troy. In that report, I think you mentioned there were going to be some follow-on addendums. And I just wonder what the status was and whether what we're doing is going to supersede that.
No, the addendums I had envisioned were the documents that help inform what I drew together. So some of the jail assessment stuff caught me off guard, Steve. I'd have to go back and look. It was some of the other informational documents that I either reviewed or received, UW Platteville lease, Richland lease. Those sort of documents that were informational as I was scoping it out. And those were proposed. A couple questions were raised as whether or not they should or should not be in there, but nothing that you're doing now would supersede any of that in any way. The idea would be to just have cover sheets and the addendums after the body of the document. And frankly, the addendums will be probably about 3 times the size of the plan. So those can be added or subtracted as directed by you all.
I didn't mean to catch it. Just when she mentioned addendums, it reminded me of something I'd meant to ask earlier.
Yeah, and as we go through this, we may talk about those again because we haven't gotten to the part, for example, with the jail. So I would agree. I like, as I'm looking at this particular graphic, I think it's easy to follow and I think it adds to our document. So I would agree to put it in there unless somebody else.
I'm fine with being in the document.
Okay, so I think we will add that in then. Moving on. Sorry, I'm trying to find too many tabs open. Okay.
Do you want me to keep going through the document
Yeah,
like last?
I think we just had mission and vision then, correct?
Yep. So just let me give you a little. So what I did was I listened and re-listened to what everyone was talking about and tried to come up with an option that incorporated all of the suggestions that everyone had. And then Mr. Langrick also then sent both a mission and a vision statement for us to look at as well. So I wanted to give that to you in its entirety. I didn't want to try to mess around with trying to incorporate that into what we'd already said. I thought we should look at both and we can decide whether we want to choose one or the other, or if we want to yet again try to combine them. So so the new mission statement, I mean, I think you've all seen it, but I guess, I don't know if you want me to read it just so you can hear how it flows, but to ensure fiscal solvency and the long-term value of decisions made today, Richland County will embrace a strategic approach and anticipate the future, fostering a stable and adequate tax base. By consistently improving its use of tax revenues for the common good, the county will provide quality services for individuals while recognizing its responsibilities to the community as a whole. I went through a zillion different versions of trying to figure it out, but this was the best, grammatically, the best way I could come up with, including what we wanted without writing a paragraph, a long paragraph. This is already quite long. So anyway, I don't care if you don't like it. I will not take offense if you want to change it again, if whatever. I'm not, I have a thick skin, so please feel free to critique away. And then option 2, he sort of, you can see his thought process. He went through the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And so I left it in there just so you could see his thought process. But then his reads, Richland County employees, elected officials, district supervisors, and contracted partners effectively provide mandated and desired non-mandated services and representation to eligible residents, clients, businesses, and organizations with effectiveness, professionalism, and fiscal responsibility to meet the service needs of the community and facilitate prosperity.
Okay, would you do me a favor, if you guys don't mind? I'd like to read through the vision statements too before we go back and adjust, just because I think that they work together and I want to hear both of them together before we discuss which one of each. So if you
It
want
helps
to
me
just,
also.
yeah, if you just want to keep reading, Melissa, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So again, same scenario, went through and tried to capture everything that we talked about. So here's what I came up with. To achieve a resilient local economy in which housing, jobs, and population are balanced, natural resources and amenities are preserved, and a place where people love life, enjoy work, and are empowered to raise thriving families. And option 2 would be Richland County's 10-year vision is to continue enhancements to the structure of the county organization, ensure the fiscal solvency of operations, and develop accepted processes for evaluating and prioritizing services. Through these efforts, Richland County hopes to help lead the community in identifying problems appropriate for government intervention or services, facilitating public discussions and collaborations to solve problems, and engaging with stakeholders on outcomes that benefit future generations. This vision is built on the understanding of balancing the dreams and possibilities of the future with the realities of the present.
Thank you. And Administrator Langrek, could you walk us through a little bit on your thoughts on these two that you proposed?
I can, in regards to the mission statement, it's kind of more of a military type of a mission statement, of which I was then programmed to always address kind of the 5 W's and possibly a Y. So that's kind of where that comes from. The vision statement, like the mission statement, is very organizational centric. It's kind of a bias from your administrator on looking what the organization's doing inside the walls, and then looking at our limitations and our focuses on how we're directing then those community type of impacts. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think it's important to be known that it's very kind of, again, organization and administrative biased in looking into it with the events that I have on my horizon for the organization and the tasks that are in front of me. So I think that needs to be considered. But again, so I guess that's where I'm coming from without further mumbling.
Thank you. All right, thoughts?
This reminds me again of the fact that when we're working on this thing, there's kind of an inward-looking perspective and what do we want from the county perspective, and Clint's pointing out the part where we're looking at our own, how well we're doing what we want to do as a governing entity. So they're both important. I don't know how we combine or pick.
I hear where you're coming from, and I guess my thought on it was I personally like when the mission statement is somewhat shorter and maybe a little bit, for lack of a better word, fluffy. I don't know if fluffy is the right word. That is a bad word. Maybe not as specific as far as getting into. I liked either the very original mission statement or the one that Melissa came up with potentially. But then I actually really like Administrator Langrek's option for the vision statement, because I feel like that fleshes out the how are we going to get to what we want to accomplish in the mission statement. But maybe that's backwards. I guess I don't remember which way the mission and vision statement is supposed to go. Clint, you had mentioned that last time. Do you remember, Administrator Langrek, which one, or maybe Troy does, which one is supposed to be shorter and punchier and which one is like the longer fleshed out version?
I don't know if there's this is Administrator Langer. I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer. I think, I guess my familiarization again has been a mission statement is kind of boils it down to a shorter, conciser version, and then your vision is kind of where you expand it and put some context around your mission statement. But I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do it.
And that is what I was thinking. Carol?
Yeah, and I guess my impression is that the vision is the piece that is a little more inspirational and where you want to get. And the mission is a little more nuts and bolts, like Clint's saying. But I don't know if that's what everybody thinks. That's the way I've always thought of the two. Thought of it. Yeah,
Aren't you saying the opposite?
I am saying the opposite of you.
But I thought that he said the same thing I said. Maybe you need to restate that again, Administrator Langlock.
The context that I was shooting for was to have a mission statement that really addressed the 5 whys directly, and then a vision to kind of put a little bit more context and to answer more, expound on the whys and how the mission statement impacts outside of the organization was the intentions of it, a little bit more of what the future should look like. But again, which one's larger and which one's smaller, it's might be 6 one way, half a dozen the other way, as long as everybody can agree to what the real bits and pieces of it are.
Troy, did you have any thoughts or anything you want to mention about these options?
Yeah, just the mission statement really never changes. That harken back to why you were created. That's generally what that's tied to for an organization. And then the vision could change, generally not beyond 10 years, but that's the direction you're headed. So reason for being and direction you're headed are kind of how I myself view those for an organization. The only other specific comment I had is one of the mission statements talk about directors and staff and board members and consultants. Just a note, I thought that was really sharp. I think that really moves your culture, not just through your people, but through your money, and it flows out whatever you do. So just a note, I thought that was a really strong add as you contract or procure or what have you. And I say that as somebody who you kind of contract with. It's good to know that we're expected to be behaving the way your staff is behaving. So I thought that was a strong add.
Yeah.
Wikipedia.
Thank you.
Why an organization exists.
Can you ask Steve? I'm sorry, Steve, can you talk into a microphone?
Oh, it might not be turned on. You push it all the way up.
How's that now? Sorry.
No,
Mission statement is a short.
he's still not on a mic.
Nothing. It
Oh,
keeps
now you're
going
good.
off.
There you go.
Yeah, I think the battery's dead.
You're better now.
No. That's
Won't read it all. It does give you. Now? No good? Mission statement is a short statement of why an organization exists, what its overall goal is, identifying the goal of its operations, what kind of product or service it provides, its primary customers or market, and its geographical region of operation. Basically, that's what it's telling you. Wikipedia.
all right. I'm just reading through the various statements again.
A vision statement is an inspirational statement of an idealistic, emotional future of a company or group. Vision describes a basic human emotion that a founder intends to be experienced by the people the organization interacts with. It grounds the group so it can actualize some impact on the world.
Options.
Is anyone talking or is it just quiet there?
It's quiet. We're reading.
Okay, I just want to make sure because sometimes it's hard to tell if someone's talking without a mic.
Well, I don't know. With this discussion that we're having, honestly, I like all the options that we've read. I will say, I do particularly like option 2 on the vision.
At some point, I think we just have to pick, right? We can't stare at it forever.
Right? Yes,
Um,
we do. I guess, do you want to
I mean,
vote
I'm
on
okay
your?
with I'm okay with taking option 2 for both of them. I mean, I don't know. I think they're both. I don't think that any of it is bad. I don't think either option 1 or option 2 for either of them is bad. So I think we just need to pick. And I mean, and if
I
people
would be
don't, I
okay
mean,
with-
I guess when the rest of the board reads it, if they don't like it, we could keep these other options, in the background and say, well, these were other ones we discussed, and then whatever.
No, that's a good point. This could still get modified when we bring it to the full board.
I do think we need to have these things in the back of our mind, though, as we continue to go through this plan, because really they should be the backbone of what we're forming here. And to that end, I feel like option 2 of both of them is very specific and focused and provides that kind of framework.
I think that's fine. I mean, I don't think we can go wrong with either one. So I would be fine with picking option 2 for both of them.
Myself as well. I would move to that effect.
We gotta
I'll
move on.
second.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
All right, great. Are we actually making a motion on this? All right, well then all those in favor of option 2 for both mission and vision, say aye.
Aye.
All right. I do think, Melissa, that yes, we could keep those alternatives around if this does become a discussion again.
Sounds good.
They capture some important stuff, and they may still color what we do as we go on.
Could you guys hear Supervisor Carroll?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then I guess we'll move on. Supervisor Luck?
Yeah, so I did, after listening to the last meeting, I really didn't get a sense that we really thought we needed to include any kind of paragraph on strength, so I didn't do it. I think that if we continue going through this document and we don't think that our strengths are coming through strong enough, we could write that later, and so I chose not to spend my time doing that.
Sounds good to me.
So there's nothing to say there. I just didn't do it. So,
Does
okay,
that bring
so
us to the end of that one then?
that is the end of that one. Yep. So we officially have a version of part 1 that we are okay with. So I will go ahead and add the new org chart, and I will make the changes to the vision and mission statement. And then next time we can just take one more peek at it, but everyone can read through it with all the changes accepted, and we should be good.
Thank you. So that brings us to chapter 2 then, strategic goals, which again, in your iPads is going to be in the first folder, the folder for September 2nd. I did want to say before we get into this, Troy, you had sent that email about perhaps reformatting this document, and I thought it had a really good point. Could you expound on that a little?
Am I muted? No. Yeah, I did. I was chewing on what you all had discussed at the last meeting, and my own mind when I structured the document with capital and operations, that's how I think about budgets and the levers that can be pulled. It doesn't necessarily speak to what you all are talking about, which is clear direction and priorities, which I think is awesome. So and it kind of shows a little bit into Melissa's revisions. She identifies each of the sort of strategic priority projects and then parentheses after them, such as effectiveness and growth and so forth. In lieu of that, I offered to, when edits are made, I could structure the document around those 4 priorities. I don't think they'll be long enough or necessary to have a chapter each, but some bigger headings that said, okay, under the priority for effectiveness, here's how we're going to increase effectiveness. Around growth, here's how we increase growth, and so forth. So just a restructuring to really focus on your priorities, which I think really made sense.
I really like that. So if other committee members don't have an objection, I'd like to at least see what that would look like. I tend to think very much in outline format. And so to me, that makes sense since we've already identified our strategic priorities to then have the rest of the document, which I believe, Melissa, we had talked about that during this, which is why we started to identify each of these areas under what they would go with. So like you mentioned.
Right, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think the conversations that we all had was we need to make sure that everything in our plan ties into our strategic goals. Because if it doesn't tie into our strategic goals, then what are we doing?
Exactly.
So that was why we started labeling each individual item as to where it fits in. And I do really like the idea of having effectiveness items all together and having whatever the other ones are, I don't even remember now, but having them all together it makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, I'm in total agreement.
Okay, so I think, yeah, if we could, were you, I guess, offering Troy to reformat in that sense?
Yeah, yes, yeah, you bet. I'd like direction on whether you'd like me to do that based on whatever we come out of this meeting with, or do you want to make the editorials and then do it? Doesn't necessarily matter to me.
Maybe it makes sense to make the edits. I mean, because we're not really changing the actual meats of it, we're just rearranging. Yeah, I guess since we already have all of these comments within these documents, unless Supervisor Luck has another opinion, I think reformatting it after we're done editing is fine.
I think after makes the most sense because we might change some of what this content is too. So
Right.
why make him go through changing it all around if we're just going to change stuff again? So yeah, I think it makes sense to wait till after. And honestly, I went through and put these effectiveness, growth, I put them in there kind of on my own, just kind of trying to decide where it fits. But we as a committee may decide that I didn't categorize them correctly and we may want to change them. So that would be
Well, maybe
completely appropriate.
let's start by listing those. And I just minimized my document that listed it, but it was effectiveness, growth. Does anybody have it in front of them?
Improvement, growth, effectiveness, and what is the fourth one?
I had trouble finding it.
Oh, here, it's in our first one. I can reopen my first one.
Following growth, we have improved county identity and marketing. Am I correct there? Or maybe not. No, I'm sorry. Maintain investment in the community development.
Effectiveness,
Focus was the
growth,
fourth
focus,
one.
and improvement.
Focus, yeah.
Effectiveness,
Okay.
growth, focus, and improvement are the 4.
So then as we go through chapter 2 and keep going, we can look at where we think things fall. I did want to say before we get into these edits, as I've been going through these documents, I've been thinking about this document as a whole and the fact that we are trying to make some, for the purpose of this specific plan, 3-year kind of goals here as to things we want to work on accomplishing. And I guess I was looking through some of these and I'm thinking we need to be careful that what we're putting in is something that we can effectively work on addressing within the time frame and the resources that we have. And I just don't want to add in things where we mean well, but it's something that we might not necessarily be able to effectively address within the constraints of this, because then I feel that it begins to weaken the integrity of it. I don't want any part of this to be something that's just something we want, but we can't actually, I don't know. And maybe, I don't know if that makes entire sense or if you guys agree with me, but I guess I had a couple things specifically that on our edits that I wanted to talk about in relation to that, to ask you guys, is this something realistic for us to, mark out measurable goals on here and being able to effectively track within our time frame?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I agree. The only thing I will say is that, a strategic plan can and should be a fluid document. Things do change, and something that seems a priority today, 2 years from now, we may realize it's not, or that it's not attainable. So I don't think that it's wrong or bad to put items in here that we should be thinking about, that maybe we won't get to it, but we should be thinking about how we would get to that goal. So having it in here and having it, that keeps it on your radar and makes you, if we're going to be the committee that's reviewing this, that means we'll be talking about what is and isn't being accomplished. And so I guess I agree with you somewhat, but I also don't think that it's bad to put something in here that we may not be able to get to in 3 years, but it's something that's really important and we should be thinking about, so that when we do have time to get to it, we're already on our way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I guess I'm thinking more in terms of things where, because we've been talking about how particularly right now, we need to really focus on some internal things. And so I think that there are some things that we might want to add to here, that which would maybe make more sense for a different type of plan. What was the plan that you had referred to before? Comprehensive plan, yeah. Where it might be something that would maybe potentially better fit in there than it would in this specific document.
Madam Chair, do we think that this committee will be working on a comprehensive plan once we finish our short-term strategic plan goals?
Well, that's a good question. We could talk about that, and actually we do have the room to talk about that, because we have on our agenda,
Madam Chair,
we have items that would cover that. Yes, Carol.
Two things. I also agree that it doesn't hurt to put some ideas in here that might take more than 3 years to fully flesh out. I mean, why did we pick 3 years? And the further out you go, the harder it is to predict what's going to happen. But my second thing is the comprehensive plan. When the last one was done, the intent was that it would be renewed every 10 years, or redone, or revisited. And we're a bit overdue anyway, so it's quite possible we'll be working on one, hopefully, in the year or two.
Okay. Yeah, I think we are on the same page, and it might make more sense when we get to the edit that I was kind of questioning. I'll bring it up then. So if you want to start going through.
Okay, hold on. I have one question related to that.
Yes.
Do we have a comprehensive plan?
We do, but again,
Can
it's over 10 years old, and I don't know that anyone even has read it.
I feel like we should read it. Can
agree.
it be?
Where did you find this?
I would like to see it. If someone could find it and put it in
I
our
did
folder.
read it, and I do have a copy. Mike Bindle had it, and it's a binder about 2 inches thick, so it's a bit of homework. But they did a lot of work back then, and there's a lot of thoughtful stuff in it. But it takes some time to read through. If you guys want to read it, I can bring it and we can make copies or do something.
It's not in a PDF form?
I don't know. We'd have to ask Mike.
It's on our website. I'll send you all the link.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thank you. I guess I thought we didn't even have one, so that's extremely helpful to know.
Awesome. Thank you, Troy. Maybe we could even put it in one of our folders on our iPads. Okay, are we ready to go through chapter 2?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll let you
Okay.
go through on your comments.
All right, so I mean, we've already kind of talked about this, but one of the first things when we were kind of going through this document that we thought of was that we really felt like it was important that everything tie back into our strategic priorities. So that's that first comment there. That's just letting you know. And we took out operations and put strategic goals. Semantics. That was just, so I guess that's the first question is, do we like calling it strategic? Although it may change if Troy's going to reorganize this anyway, and it's not going to be by chapters. I think it's probably a non-issue at this point.
I'm going to pause you for a second. Did we lose the other Clinton? or Administrator Langrick was pulling things up, but I see we only have one. Administrator Langrick, are you still there?
I'm there. Which comments version are we pulling up to
Okay.
reference for chapter?
So we're in, I think where you find it would be in our first folder, so for September 2nd. And then it's the comments version 2 on operations. We're doing the ones where you can see the comments on the side.
Okay.
So it's the 4th document in that folder.
Okay. This right here.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, ready?
Yes, thank you.
So do we agree that I probably at this point having the chapter title is probably not as critical if we're going to rearrange how this is structured. So we'll leave that
I
be.
would agree.
Do we agree that we want to make sure that all tactics listed in this document should be directly tied and, you know, to a strategic goal?
I would agree.
Yes.
We're good? Okay. All right, so that's that one. One comment that was brought up by, I don't remember which one of us when we were talking was, you know, can and should we have some specific language about the role of our county board chair? More of like an intentional leadership kind of definition or instruction in here. So I guess we just need to decide if that's something that we want to add to this, if there's a specific task related to that. I'm not sure. This wasn't one that I have a feeling on. I mean, I think it's important that our county board chair role be well defined, and I'm not sure that it is right now.
I don't know that that belongs in this document, though. I don't remember the thought process on this particular.
I don't either.
And I don't disagree that we need to have that defined, but for the purpose of this document, do we feel that that's a priority to define that right here?
I
Well-
don't either. I think it's gonna be probably ever changing as Clint's duties continue to, what's the word we're looking for? Increase.
Right.
We do have a document that we did pass back a year ago last August that is our authority of management, roles of members and chairs of committees, boards and commissions. Underneath that, we do have housed a spot for roles of individual chairs, and then we do have a small section that is roles of the county board chair, which is kind of additional bits that are pulled out of our county board rules, specifically rule number 2 and rule number 19 and rule number 3. So we do kind of have another policy that out there that's trying to house the role of the county board chair. And a lot of that, was kind of put in context of what the authorities are and what the expectations are. I don't know if this is more in the context of leadership versus management kind of thing, and being the lead visionary on things. I'm not sure, but that's another spot we have it.
I think that seems like the logical place for this, and so I would say we can just ignore that comment in here because it's addressed somewhere else.
I would agree with that. Hey, I just want to acknowledge, I just saw that Carrie Severson's on. So Carrie, if you have anything, jump in. Sorry, I didn't see you before.
Thanks. No, I'm just joining right now. I guess I kind of forgot about it. I worked last
Right,
night
we're
and I was
happy to have
tired,
you.
so yeah.
Great. So moving on, streamlining organizational structure. One of the things we thought was really important was to create a countywide organizational chart, which has already been done. So I don't know about you guys, but I sometimes like to write lists of something that I've just done so I can cross it off. But I think we can.
Same.
I think we can delete this one because it has truly already been done. Unless we want to have a little more input as far as the potential of a different format, or I mean, I really like that one, but that's just me. Taylor, take it out or?
I would say take it out. I think we have other things to focus on, and that one looks good.
Okay. Got it. It's deleted. All right. So then the next one, what they had before was centralized common countywide processes and systems under the county administrator. And we just wanted some specific language. Understanding also, I guess I should back up to say that, you know, all of these individual tactics that are listed in here are what are going to be specifically transferred to our work plan. And that work plan will be where we will assign who's responsible for making sure it happens. You know, if we want to put any kind of dates on when we expect it to be done by, those kind of things. So that was why we added a little bit of language here, although we have sort of created a finance department, but again, I'm sure Mr. Langrick would agree that we may need to flesh that out a little better. Same thing with HR. We don't really have an HR department, and we don't have a countywide maintenance department. So these were 3 things that we thought were really good tactics that we should be focusing on over the next 3 years to try to figure out. So does anyone have any comments on the additions, changing that language?
I'm good with it.
Okay.
I guess my only question would be, are there any other functions that would
Right.
also?
Yeah, I mean, specifically things that we would want to try to combine, you know, into a more efficient countywide kind of.
Well, I think Melissa and everybody would be purchasing, because partly because of that's what I do, but I mean, if we start buying all of our copy paper under one contract of some type, the amount of savings you're gonna create should be quite beneficial, I would think, but it's a process to, you know, you gotta track what people need and everybody else, there's different sizes, there's different qualities that they need, but even that's just given the paper products, but.
Right. So do you think that's incorporated in that second bullet where it says improve the county's procurement process to be consistent countywide, maximize procurement rewards and benefits, and identify joint procurement opportunities across departments and with other organizations? And then specifically improving the purchasing policy
Yeah, I would agree, that should cover.
that captures what you're getting.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I think and we agree. You know, I think when we were talking about this, we all completely agree that there's got to be ways we could save money by doing bulk purchases and being more efficient with how we purchase things.
I guess I would like to hear Administrator Langrick's thought, since this is talking about centralizing under him. Do you feel like there's any other priorities that we're not addressing in this that we should be, or would you differ then with what we have here?
I guess, you know, kind of leading back to the mindset with the vision or the vision statement of putting together a realistic kind of a 10-year plan. I think that, I mean, I think there's lots of different areas we can improve in, whether it's in procurements and having centralized departments, centralized service funds. There's been discussion on more centralized parks and trails as its own kind of thing. There's a lot of good opportunities out there, but I guess, and again, this is my preference, that the strategic plan, if we keep it focused on a smaller scale and really prioritize 1, 2, or 3 things that we really want to see accomplished, versus having a list that we might not get to, might add more clout to making sure we get those done. I guess you might have the reverse argument of, well, if we don't have it on the document and captured somewhere, it could slip and then fall to the yesteryear or to future years. But I think like a finance and an HR and taking a look at cross-department maintenances is a really good start. And if you can arrive at that reasonably in 10 years, I think that's a good goal to have. Past that, with trying to do too much, it might lead to, again, it'll take you off of focus, is my concern.
So are you saying that these are reasonable to focus on? Because you mentioned keeping it to 3-year focus. Are these 3 reasonable to focus on, or is even this too much?
No, I think these 3 would be a reasonable goal. How that mixes with other types of systems, I don't know, but I like just having those three.
Okay. Great, then I think we're all in agreement.
All right. All right, so, and then the last one, we had deleted, it says coordinate upgrades to the payroll process so it's uniform for employees across all departments or enterprises. And maybe with this being a 3-year plan, purchasing a payroll program that is uniform might be too lofty because there's a huge price tag that goes with, I believe, my understanding, there's a huge price tag that goes with, because the payroll program would be directly linked to an accounting program and we would have to get away from the AS400 or whatever, and it could be a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Langford, but I believe maybe we need to leave the original language where we just try to upgrade what we have while thinking about how we're going to create or buy or purchase a payroll program. I guess I need some insight onto what's actually possible as far as improving our payroll system. Mr. Langford.
We're moving forward with the purchase of a new AS400 system. With that, it's kind of an investment into the next. It covers us from about 5 to 7 years safely. To do a purchase of a new payroll system in which you'd also have a new finance system to handle your accounts receivables, accounts payables, your entire, your general ledger, all those types of things housed in the same system. Reasonably, it's probably a 5-year project, and that it might even be a 6-year project for us, because our step one is to try to get us talking together to understand each other's financial bits. Then you'd probably want a year or two to evaluate on what other types of systems are out there and evaluate what might meet our needs. And then you're going to need probably a year to 18 months to really then incorporate a system, and probably a year to a year and a half to try to troubleshoot to work out all the bugs. So I think it's a good thing to keep on your organizational plan, because it is all encompassing and it is a total pain to do. But the reality is that we have to financially plan for it, as well as it's probably several hundreds of thousands of dollars up front, as well as potential maintenance costs on the back end of it as well.
So, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can I?
Yes, please.
So what I'm hearing is that because it is a long process in evaluating exactly what you need, and so it sounds like we do need to have this in the plan. We do need to start talking about this now, so that in 5 to 7 years, when our AS400 contract, our current system is outdated, we're ready to go with a new one. So what language would we want, though? Like, the language would be that we are evaluating our payroll program to determine our payroll and accounting program. I'm sorry, I'm typing as I go here. Just a program to determine what direction, or to determine needs for transfer to a new system in 2020, whatever, or what am I saying here?
I think I would turn this to Administrator Langgrek. What makes the most sense to you? I think you probably have the most knowledge in this.
So the jargon is an enterprise resource planning system, or an ERP system, which is kind of the language that's used to encompass both a payroll system and also then handling your financials. And yes, I think you would want to evaluate the need of a new ERP system and implement a new ERP system. I think there's 2 steps to it. We have to make sure that moving into a new system is going to be an appropriate fit for the county, and then really planning out what that entire process looks like by phases, which is again a pretty big undertaking.
So if we're talking about a 3-year span of this document, 3 years we would be in the evaluation phase, or would we be moving from evaluation into the next step? And what did you call it? ERP is what?
It's ERP is the jargon. It is enterprise resource planning.
Planning. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Carroll?
I'm not familiar with what problems we think we've got with our accounting program, and I'm assuming, Clint, you're in close contact with the MIS and with Derek and everybody to understand what they think needs to happen and what the problems are now, why we would assume we need to migrate to something like this. Previous life, I lived through a couple of migrations from one ERP to another, and it is painful and expensive and only to be done if you really have to.
Yeah, I would concur. That's why I think it's important on the front end that we really, and this is something we plan on starting post-budget, is to start having all of our financial folks from bigger departments starting to meet together on a monthly, quarterly basis to start trading notes on it. If we're going to change from a system again, though, it's probably a good 2-3 year process of really evaluating if we need to. With that also is the evaluation on if our current servers with our current vendor and our current model is going to be a viable resource if they're going to continue with updates and they're going to continue using that platform. You do have to remember that our AS400 system is the crown jewel of IBM 1986 fleet, I think is when they came out with it. We still operate on a green screen. The system has a lot of older kind of antiquated type of things to us, but the trade-off that you find with moving to new systems is you don't have quite the nuts and bolts to be able to pull out all your types of data and slosh through it with Microsoft Excel worksheets, which is surprisingly enough almost a convenience when you compare it to other ERP systems, which start to separate out your data and you can't mass converge everything out the way you want to. So there's trade-offs to it. So that's why I would say that as a goal, the first part should be evaluated and say, really, okay, when we reach the end of the life on this box in 5 to 7 years, do we want to reinvest into another box, or do we want to migrate to an entirely different platform? And then part of that too is, do we want to migrate on a platform that is in-house and we store our own data, or do we looking to go to a cloud-based system? And again, all those things take time to work through, and we don't want to be in a comparable situation like we were a few months ago, where we know that our current box is dying and we have to do kind of a more of a rushed process so that it doesn't expire with us still using it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Clint's take on it, and based on that and the other things we've said, I just think we need to change the wording a bit from purchase a payroll program or coordinate upgrades to more of an ongoing evaluation.
I believe Supervisor Luck was working on that. What did you come up with so far?
I have evaluate the needs of a new ERP system to potentially update our payroll and accounting system. But I mean, I can reword it again later too, but let's see, evaluate. I don't know. Anyone have any ideas?
Well, are we saying that an upgrade is essentially inevitable? Is that the bottom line here?
What was the question?
Are we saying that an upgrade will be inevitable at a certain point? Is that what I'm hearing?
It seems like we should probably move away from a 1986 system. That's just
right. So I guess in my mind, if it's going to be inevitable, even if it's 10 years from now, then maybe it's evaluate in order to upgrade in the future or something similar to that.
Yeah, I would say it's an inevitability. It's just kind of the wind. And I would say right now we're probably a little bit on the back half of the curve on migrating off the system as other counties have done that were previously on it. But there are still counties that are operating with the system. The other part on what it looks like in 5 to 7 years is, there's always the dream that some software company is going to land a system that everybody really likes, because it seems like with evaluations with other counties, there's things about it that it's an improvement from the AS400 system, and there's things then that they find out that they don't like about the system. The other thing that has to get evaluated is too, is that we're going to have to still have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's going to be a need for several other comparable systems that are going to have to tie into it, whether it's the new road system out at Highway or timekeeping systems at Pine Valley. There's always going to have to be crosswalks to supporting software to probably meet the needs of the 20 different departments and how they function. So, you know, the longer we wait, there's always that potential that one software designer finally gets the silver bullet for all Wisconsin counties that has an interface ERP system that can get you right from a time clock to point of purchase to receipts, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and integrating in highway budgeting with their cost budgeting. So that's kind of the trade-off. So I would say, yes, it's inevitable that eventually it's going to come to an end. It's just, when do we think we want to move off? And is there a possibility that there's a shining star that we should be waiting around to see if everybody migrates to?
Okay, so again, I think then perhaps the edit of evaluate, I don't remember what all you had in there. Instead of to potentially upgrade, it would maybe better be stated in order to upgrade in the future. We don't have to put a specific time frame on that.
Okay, so what I had was evaluate the needs of a new ERP system to update our payroll and accounting systems, although a system is twice, so I just am not sure of the lingo, like, and I don't know, putting an ERP in there, I'm not sure if like county supervisors and the public at large would understand what that is, that's why I felt like I should say payroll and accounting system, because I wouldn't understand what that means.
You can put payroll and finance system if that makes it more transparent. That's fine. And two, Melissa, if you want to send us what you got, and I can work on it too with Derek and Josh and Tammy, and we can try to make it say what we think is the best solution.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm fine with that.
May I, Madam Chair, may I offer a thought, I guess?
Yes, please, Troy.
Some of this stuff will be iterative, as you all are kind of discussing. I wonder if for the strategic planning language for that purpose, if simply saying something like pursue with measurable progress the acquisition of a new system, blah, blah, blah. You'll have, I think you have acknowledged you'll be using some sort of the matrix that I provided, which has start dates and progress to date. And if you look at that quarterly or update it, that would be your working tool. And so, so long as if you're heading that direction with some measurable progress, you know, maybe year one is evaluating the system and getting buy-in, maybe 2 is getting quotes or whatever. Just a thought.
I actually really like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Melissa, are you trying to get audio?
Okay, so
There
I
you
just
are.
wrote pursue with measurable progress the acquisition of a new payroll and finance system.
Okay. And then Clint, I mean, for sure, if you guys want to still take a look at that and tweak it, that'd be fine. Great. So I guess we can move on then, right?
Yep. All right, so then the next I mean, we put effectiveness after improved financial practices. And I guess streamline organizational structure, do we agree that that's under effectiveness?
In my mind, it would be.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could make an argument that it's also improvement. But
Right.
Roy,
I
you've
guess
been doing this a long time. Any thoughts? I don't know if you heard me, Roy.
Sorry, I apologize. Did I hear my name? I got cut out briefly.
Yeah, sorry. I was just asking, she was wondering, Supervisor Luck was saying streamline organizational structure. We had effectiveness under that or behind that, which makes sense to me, but I think you could also make the argument that it could fit under improvement. So I didn't know if you had a thought on what you felt like that as far as goals, what that came under specifically?
Yeah, I would say effectiveness. I think it's organization wide as opposed to duty and task. In my mind, there was more language to each of these, but as I recall, I was thinking the organization as a whole and this effectiveness, whereas improvement would be streamlining particular tasks or processes and so forth. I have to find the document and go see the original language.
So that brings us to the improved financial practices, which I also, instead of putting it under improvement, even though it seems like it maybe should be improvement because it says improve, I did say effective. I guess in my mind, it was anything that, makes us more efficient, and that to me, that's effectiveness. Improving is making it better, but not necessarily making it more efficient. So I don't know. That was sort of how in my mind, I separated things out, but I definitely am not attached to, I could change this to improvement if people felt we should.
Well, I'm curious, did you find any then that were specifically improvement? I don't remember if we.
Yeah, so develop a culture of support for employees. I did as an improvement. Prioritize staff service over staffing. I did as an improvement, because that's not necessarily making us more efficient or effective. But maybe it is too. I mean, that's why I said I wanted you guys' input, because these were just me looking at it I just sort of went with my gut, and not a whole lot of like in-depth thought as far as, so I'm not wedded to any of these. And if people feel we want to change it, I am more than happy to do that.
I suspect some of the evaluation and HR policies would be under improvement. I think that speaks to creating a culture of continual improvement. It also doesn't necessarily have to fit in one theoretically, and
Right. That's true. And some of the subtasks tactics could fall. I mean, instead of doing it at the header, I mean, we could actually get place each tactic. I mean, that would be the other way to approach this.
We might get bogged down in this.
But I think that's how I structured I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I believe that's how I structured that implementation matrix, where each of the tactics align with a what are they called? I'm getting lost in my own jargon. With each of the priorities. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is let's leave the strategic priority designation at the header for that particular section. And does anyone have an opinion on if improved financial practices should be effectiveness or improvement?
I personally don't care. Either one's fine with me.
Either way.
We're capturing good ideas here, and whatever the title is above them. If it helps with other people to put framework on it, fine, but I get it.
What if I put both? Because I do think it's important that we make sure that everything is lining up with our strategic priorities. And if it lines up with more than one, that's even better, right?
Sure.
Yes, no, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think go with that for now. We'll have to look at how that's actually going to flow as we change the format later, but
oh, that's true. That's true. If he's pulling them out, that's true. It could get messy. Okay, well, I'll put them both in, and we can come back to that. I mean, we're going to be looking at this document again, I'm sure. So, all right. So then under tactics, the only thing that we changed, mostly to stay consistent with the changes we had made in that first document, we, instead of mandated, we call them statutorily required services under that third bullet point under, the third open bullet under the second bullet of tactics in that financial practices section. So if you go up to financial practices, Yeah, so down statutorily required is in red. And then the question we had is identify how departments would respond to unexpected cuts or events. And it was just a comment like, how are we going to measure this? Like, is this departments coming up with, you know, some sort of emergency plan? No, I guess that's the question that came up. So does anyone have any thoughts on, or is it, we leave it up to the departments to?
Well, Troy, do you remember what the original thought was here?
Yep. Part of what I was pulling from is in the 2019 budget process for 2020 process for 2021, you all had asked individuals to identify various cuts, some percentage of cuts. My belief too is that perhaps asking them to what they would do with additional funding could be of value. So I added both of those pieces, but part of it is also scenario planning. The gut reaction probably from many will be, we have nothing more to cut. This could be structured that in such a way that it focuses on services without thinking of staffing and cutting. How would services be delivered should there be a cut? And so pivoting away from staffing to focus on services. What are other means of delivering a service? Gets sticky real quick, of course, but that's a thought.
So that would potentially be something that if we kept this, then, if I'm hearing this correctly, like we could maybe make those more specific scenarios that we're talking about in the work plan, such as, okay, if you need to be able to give these services with budget cuts, how are you going to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, correct. Correct. And I've been to, part of what spurred this, I've been to training and conferences where they have workshops on various modes of delivering the same service. You know, you do a charrette or a sketch or what have you. You know, we got 72 models of delivering the same service in the state of Wisconsin. So this may not happen overnight, but maybe this is a multi-year effort where department heads are charged with seeking out new modes of delivering services. Again, it's a bit of homework. I'm sure that'll go over like a lead ball, but nevertheless, it's a good way to learn and explore new options.
Well, thank you. I feel like, unless you guys have other comments, I feel like that does give us some idea of how we could actually measure this.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so should I move on?
Yes.
Right. So increase coordination. Again, you know, I feel like this improvement and I guess, you know, maybe we should be looking at our how we defined effectiveness and improvement. But I thought it was effectiveness. And the only changes we thought we should actually put in some specifics under tactics. You know, joint contracting for capital projects to find savings from reduced mobilization fees, increased competitive bidding, et cetera. So these were the things that we came up with. I don't know, it is by no means any kind of, you know, all-inclusive list. I think this was just some of the things that came to mind right away. You know, I think the idea was joint contracting with townships or, you know, things like that for mowing, for paving, for road, for snow plowing. And I don't know if there's other things we want to add in there or if it was just enough to add a few examples so people understand what we're talking about.
Any thoughts?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think when we say increased coordination, the first piece is actually communicating. I mean, does each township have different procurement vendors that they're working well with, and do the other townships know about it? That kind of thing. In other words, sharing more information, and you may or not share procurement, but at least know what everybody's doing. And I don't know, but I would guess most wouldn't even know what the other townships are doing.
I think that's
Mhm.
absolutely accurate.
Right. Do we feel like that's covered in any of these bullet points? I mean, I guess I'm looking at the one right below, explore opportunities to share or contract staffing services. That would require communication.
Right, but the communication comes first before you even decide whether you want to do a joint effort or not. Just
Well-
at least know.
Right, but in order to explore it, you're going to have to communicate. So I guess as far as like measuring that, it would have to involve some sort of communication on their end.
Right.
I don't know, Administrator Langreck, do you have any thoughts?
I think it's certainly something to engage in looking at how there's ways to gain efficiencies through shared services, shared contracts, and things like that. At the same time, too, I have a growing appreciation for when you do enter into agreements with other organizations that you have to be terribly clear on defining what expectations are. Otherwise, it ends up in kind of a family feud type of situations. Same things with some of our mowing, paving, roads, snow plowing, things like that. I think we've kind of historically have kind of leaned back and forth from doing things together and then doing things independently, and it comes down again for the sake of economy versus the sake of convenience. So those are all things to weigh out, but if you can find things that work and work consistently and effectively, then they're things that should be implemented.
Do you want me to change any of the bullet points? Like, let's just say even that first one where you say communicate and potentially engage in joint procurement to capture that? Or do we think it's fine with just the create additional and modern methods to communicate events and initiatives and to generate direct input from the community, which is the fourth one? All right, I mean, I suppose we could put the fourth one first, that implies that you are communicating with your community around, and then the rest of it would follow.
I don't know if those two are, I mean, they could potentially sometimes be related. I don't know that they're always directly related when we're talking about a specific service. I don't know. In my opinion, when we say, okay, our goal is to engage in joint procurement materials and equipment whenever possible, with, I would say the caveat, if it actually makes sense. I guess in my opinion, that like includes that you're going to have to communicate. So I don't know that we have to
Specifically
state
state it. Yeah.
That's, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's fine, but when we translate all this stuff into this task matrix, I would say unless we intentionally set up communication channels between townships and the county and whatever else, you're not gonna engage in these things. You have to start talking first, and even if you don't even know for sure if you'd even want to, at least you say, who do you use for asphalt? Who do you use for this? And why did you do that? And at least increase communication. And so when we set up our work matrix, I think that kind of stuff needs to show up in there with durations and deadlines.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that also reminds me a little bit too, we ended our last meeting on looking at some of those directives that Administrator Langreck had prepared. And I know that wasn't specifically about this, but when we're talking about keeping certain departments or boards, maybe giving some tasks when we're talking about assigning these things, that's when we can get specific like that. Like, okay, so now we're talking about these services. Let's have some communication with surrounding areas as to whether this is feasible, correct? But I don't know that it needs to go in here.
Steve, do you have any wording that you think might help clarify it for you?
Evaluate joint procurement, materials and equipment whenever possible or feasible,
Ooh, that's good. I like that.
something like that, but because feasible is gonna be the big thing. I know with townships, they, being on the town board some, and there's only two people that will come and bid on seal coating in most townships. It's either gassers or gassers get the majority of the work. But So if all the townships try and work together, then unfortunately, if you're the last one on the list and the temperatures drop, then you're not gonna get a good road. We've had that happen in our township, so, they could get a better price, but I mean, and there's all kinds of other areas that could be looked at, but, I mean, we wanted to engage in it, I would agree, but, like Steve Carroll is saying, that they need to evaluate and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes look at it before, you may not engage in it, just because it's not feasible.
So
That's my thoughts.
I think that makes sense. So maybe those first two, instead of using the word engage, you'd use evaluate and then maybe change possible to feasible. Because I feel like that then would capture what Administrator Langrick was saying as well, when you have to balance economy versus convenience as well.
So the first one I have, evaluate joint procurement of materials and equipment whenever possible or feasible, or you want me to get rid of possible and just put feasible?
I personally think feasible would cover both. What do you guys think?
I can live with either or both.
Yeah, if it's rather possible or feasible, if it comes down to if it's in the best interest of the county, or
Yeah, because we're still talking, yeah.
I'm sorry, did you cut out there, Administrator Langrick?
I was just offering, rather than saying whenever possible or feasible, if it ended with whenever in the best interest of the county.
Oh, okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got evaluate joint procurement of materials and equipment whenever that doesn't sound right. If in the best, okay, evaluate joint procurement of materials and equipment if in the best interest of the county. Whenever in the best interest of the county doesn't sound right to me. Is that, or is it just me? Whenever it is,
Sure.
whenever it is in the best interest of the county.
That sounds good. Or whenever found to be in the best interest.
There you
Whenever,
go.
like found better, yeah. Whenever found to be in the best interest of the county. Okay, and then the next one would be evaluate joint contracting for capital projects to find savings resulting from reduced mobilization fees, increased competitive bidding, etc.
Do we think we need to add that whenever found on that one as well, or leave it as is then?
Maybe we should just put a sentence at the top in that first one that says, where it says the county and its municipalities have many overlapping interests, offering a good opportunity for partnerships that may result in improved service delivery or an overall savings to the county residents through efficiencies. The county will engage or will evaluate collaboration, will continually evaluate collaboration and participate when it's in the best interest of the county. I mean, instead of putting it at the end of each one of these lines, which I'm thinking we may end up doing, or just put it at the end of the first two.
I like that idea, because then you would just say evaluate joint procurement materials and equipment. And we've already said at the beginning that we're only doing that when it's in the best
When
interest.
found to be in the best interest, yeah.
I trust you find a way to put that in there and bring it to us next meeting.
Is that your way of saying you want to move on at this point?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
please.
All right, hold on. Let me. I just have to make a note to myself. But okay, sorry. I just have to write it down, or I'll forget. Although I'll probably watch this again anyway. But all right, so I've got those changes. And do we want those examples that we had added the mowing, paving, road system in there? Do we think that's helpful? Do we think we just leave those out? And
I think it could go either way. I think it's fine leaving them in.
okay. All right, workforce. I had this under growth. Do we have any thoughts on if it should go somewhere else? Okay, so it originally, I'm gonna just read.
Supervisor Carroll had a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear him.
All right, there was one more thing in the police coordination. The last bullet, I don't quite understand what that means with respect to the county's relationship with Richland Center. What are we saying there?
Is that what that's supposed to be capturing? I guess maybe this is a question for Troy.
It is a question for Troy, yeah.
Yeah, that's conversations that have come up throughout the planning process for the strategic plan, as well as our comprehensive planning in Richland Center. And you may correct me if I'm wrong, but between those four entities and private industry demand, there is more demand for land than there is immediately available land. And that was put in there just as a recognition of that factor. And let's say that's between now and the next 5 to 10 years. That was when the school district was obviously had a referendum out to do some additions and renovations and such, and other ancillary input we received. Long and the short of it is, as it came up and I talked to different partners, these and others, I frankly had a concern that you all would be bidding against each other for land. And the intention of putting this in there is to have some kind, and I know Jason, of course, Glassbrenner crosses these various partners, and hopefully we'll see all these, but some level of communication amongst the different decision makers as to which land is highest and best used for what purpose, so you're not frankly outbidding each other or working at cross purposes. That was the intention.
Got it. I mean, it strikes me that just that one bullet implies a lot of effort.
Perhaps
Okay.
the closed session red board will have that on their radar. Richland Center is pursuing a county administrator, so there's going to be more executive action over at the city level. I agree, Steve, it very well could. It may also just be integral to some of the red board's actions, but
That's all I had.
I mean, it reads coordinate, community develop. Is it supposed to say something else, or am I reading?
Oh, is it supposed to say development?
Well, that's what I'd wanted. Development, coordinate community development and land use. I suppose development. Is that what that's supposed to say, Troy? You think?
yep,
Just
thank
says
you.
develop.
Yes, sir, that's a typo on my end.
Okay. Makes more sense.
Okay, should I move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next paragraph, I'm gonna just read you what was originally there. So it was, the county employees are knowledgeable workers whose value is grounded in the information that enables them to do their job. The county's ability to provide quality service relies entirely on the attraction and retention of knowledgeable employees and the continued acquisition and effective transfer of knowledge. I think we just decided that it was that was an unnecessary part of it, that it kind of was repeating what you're saying in the second one, by saying that we want to attract knowledgeable, hardworking employees. So anyway, so we deleted it and just, so then the paragraph just reads, the county's ability to provide quality service relies entirely on the attraction and retention of knowledgeable, hardworking employees and the continued acquisition and effective transfer of knowledge. But we could add that back in if we think that that first sentence adds important content.
I personally think this is better because if we have that first statement in there, then we've got knowledge or a derivative of it 3 times.
Right? Okay. Anyone else?
I like it.
Okay, so then the next thing we changed was, we just changed the county's 2018 wage study to just saying it's the current wage study. It's the only wage study we have. And then we thought that we should add a goal of giving annual pay increases. We all felt that that was important, so that we don't fall behind in the wage study, like, you know, and have to give a big raise like we had to do this year. So I guess I need to know if we want to keep that in there or not.
Yes, I would like to hear Administrator Langrick's thoughts on that.
I think it's a goal to get us to market. I'm trying to play with the idea of annual pay increases, if that's going to be taken out of context of, well, You know, is our goal to keep up with cost of living or to continue increasing pay? So maybe if we said more of give annual pay increases until reaching market goals or something like that, just to kind of, or give annual pay increases to reach and maintain market goals. Something that puts a little bit more context on it rather than just pay
Right.
increases of a destination.
I like
I like
that.
that. So I reworded it, give annual pay increases until reaching and maintain, no, maintaining, no.
How about
Until
in order to reach and maintain?
in order and, yeah, in order.
To attain and maintain? No, reach and maintain.
To reach and
Let's
maintain.
not rhyme.
I think that's good. That's a good addition. I think you're right. We want to make sure we're clear on what we're doing there. So, okay. Anyone else? So are we saying we should keep it in?
With the specification, I like it.
Yep.
Okay. And then we just, instead of develop compensation and classification system, we felt like we've already done that with the wage study. So what we really need to do is monitor the compensation classification system for all positions to ensure they remain market competitive. And then we added that public and private sectors, and I don't remember why. Do you remember why, Ingrid or Chair?
I don't. I'm rereading that. No, I do not remember why we had that in there.
I mean, were we
Million
trying to
member
say
staff?
that, I think what we might have been trying to say was that we want our employees, we want to be matching the compensation of market competitive,
Oh.
meaning not just other
Yes.
county governments, but other private ones as well.
Yes. For example, just because I'm more familiar, like let's say our registered nurses working with Health and Human Services, it would be nice if it was somewhat competitive with working in the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be attainable, but we should be
Right.
paying attention and doing what we can, right? So everyone okay with that change then?
Yes.
All right. So develop culture of support for employees. I categorize this as improvement. Does anyone have any thoughts on changing that to something else?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Going back to that previous statement, I'm rereading it. It currently says to ensure positions remain market competitive. Not actually, are we there? Especially if we're putting public and private sectors in there.
Yeah, true. That's good. That's a good point. To ensure positions are market competitive, or
Well, if you read the whole sentence, monitor the compensation and classification system for all positions to ensure basically these positions remain market competitive, public and or private.
Yeah, but if we have that in there, I mean, currently I don't think we're there.
No.
So, and we're saying remain.
Yeah.
And that might be a bit lofty. I don't know. I feel like we might need to tweak that a little.
yeah, I think the idea behind this bullet point, and maybe Troy was that once we reach market, we want to make sure that we don't just let it fall by the wayside and then fall behind again. I think that's the point of this bullet.
Because the previous bullet, we said we were going to try and attain that once we get there and stay there, we hope.
So do we need to put back in develop rather than monitor? I know you said we already did, but I don't think that's quite gotten us, or not yet.
But the plan is still there. The plan has been developed and we're trying to follow it. So we don't need to develop it anymore.
Okay.
Troy, do you have comments on this? Am I interpreting what you meant by that correctly?
Yeah, if you've got a 2018 pay schedule and you achieve it in 2023, it's probably out of date. So, from the folks I speak to in the industry, probably every 3 years, you want to get a gut check on where it is. That doesn't mean you need to go out to the third party and consulting and all that stuff. It could be as simple as your department heads sharing information, ballpark with their colleagues. Of course, we're a much smaller organization in the county, but that's what I do at regional planning, is probably about every 3 years. I go and see what the market is. But yes, to your point, developing it once is not sufficient. You kind of got to know what the market's doing to maintain competitive pay.
So I guess I need a little clarification. So that the 2018 wage study, which is the wage study that we are currently working under, when we give the raises this year, we're still not at the 28. See, I was thinking that 2018 study told us where we needed to be or what we needed to be doing. But what we're trying to do is just get to 2018 wages.
I can
we're
speak
still
to
not
that,
there?
Madam Chair. This is Administrator Langer. If I can speak to that.
Yes. Yes, please do.
Our action that we took through Finance and Personnel this year, going forward into next year for 2022, was to age our wage schedules by compounded CPI increases to try to say if we, the schedules we adopted, if we impacted the cost of living to those schedules, where would we arrive at to try to keep those schedules up to date. What it doesn't account for is that we're at a position right now where general employees can move up to step 4 on there, and Pleasant View employees can move to step 5. Currently, the market benchmark or the cost of the position is actually at a step 8. So we've aged the schedules for next year, but we still have a bulk of our employees are back on 4, and to get them to what we see as market value for an employee that's been in the position and can perform at 100% capacity is up at a step 8. So that was the intentions with our actions for next year.
Wasn't step 8 only 80% of market value?
Administrator Langrick, there's a question of, isn't step 8 at only 80% of market value?
I guess I was at the understanding that it is market value, but I would have to go back and see if we have our step 8 at 80%. I was under the impression it is market value.
Ask a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So
Yes, go ahead.
is step 8 2018 market value or 2022 market value or 2023 market value?
The exercise of trying to age the wage schedule was to make our step 8 market value for 2022.
Okay.
But we still have a bulk of our employees that are step 4 and step 5 currently that are still below that market value.
So with that in mind, Administrator Langrick, do you have thoughts on the wording of this, since we are not at market competitive currently?
Yeah, I guess I would then propose another reach and maintain market competitiveness to show that there's still work to be done, and then to maintain it when you get there.
Okay, so that would just add it in, then we'd leave the monitor, and it would just, instead of remain, it'd be reach and maintain.
Got it.
Instead of ensure.
No, to ensure positions reach and maintain market competitive. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay. That sounds good to me.
Competitiveness. Monitor the compensation and classification system for all positions to ensure positions reach and maintain market competitiveness. Is that the right way to say that? I might have to reword that. That
Market
doesn't
competitive
right.
wages?
Market competitive wages. Yeah, that might be. Yeah, I like that. Okay. All right. Anything else on that?
I don't think so. And I did want to say, I think that just brings us to that next little section, develop a culture of support for employees. And we're at 5:10, and I just wanted to take a look at our agenda really quick before we decide if we're going to keep going here, because I know, so number 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding non-mandated services. Supervisor Luck is working on that, and we're going to just leave that for a future meeting. So then, and then the last 2, 9, or not last 2, but 9 and 10, were kind of for some of the things that we've been discussing, so I don't think we need to specifically address those this meeting. I did want to mention number 8. We discussed that at the very end of last meeting, which was reading through those 2 resolutions or proposed resolutions that Administrator Langrick had put in our folder. So I believe that would be in our first folder. I just wanted to put it out as a discussion point. Do we need to look at that again now? Do we need to make any actual action on that, or do we leave that for the committee? Feel like we should leave that for a future discussion? So those were those 2. Do you guys remember what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it didn't strike me that we needed to act on those. Administrator Langrick was showing them to us so we understood there is a tool that may be needed at some point with budget constraints. And so we got to get through this document.
Okay. I'm fine with that unless anyone felt like it was something that needed to be more of a priority.
Melissa, or this is Carrie.
Yes.
I agree with what Steve Carroll was saying, but also we need to sit down at some point and actually further discuss those 2 documents more in depth, if that's the tool that we want to use.
Yes. So I guess if what I'm hearing, Administrator Langrick, unless you feel that we need to discuss it now, it sounds like we want to keep plugging away at this document before we take a longer look and a longer discussion of those 2 documents. Would that be okay with you?
That is fine. It's a standing proposal to see if that is something that you're interested in trying to accomplish with your group, and understanding that you have a limited amount of time.
Okay. Well, thank you. So then I guess we'll go back. I think we have time to get through one more little section here at least.
Okay. Sorry, I was scrolling around and now I lost where we were.
I think we're at develop a culture of support for employees. It's page 6 of the document.
Yep, got it. Sorry. Okay, so I have that under improvement. Again, we can change that if we'd like. The only thing that we did here is under the 3rd bullet point, as we thought that the wellness program is, especially after hearing our insurance, the fact that insurance rates went up so much because we have a lot of use of our insurance program, which is fine. It's what it's there for. But I think a wellness program is a tool that we should be using to try and improve the health of our employees. So we added that. And then the next 2 were ones that kept coming up over and over when we've talked to, HHS, when Tracy has presented her information. I know I've heard it in LAJC from the sheriff, but that vacation time, especially for new employees, is an issue, and that we should be talking about what we can do about that. And then also we thought that potentially evaluating flexible work schedules may also help us, get employees, keep employees. And so those were things that we thought were important to add as goals to a culture of support for employees. So hope you guys have any comments, whether you like them, don't like those ideas, keep them, delete them, add something.
Supervisor Williamson?
I believe they're both well needed.
We definitely need more vacation time for our employees, especially new employees.
Yeah,
We have to do that. That 1 week thing is ridiculous.
agree.
I don't think there's any objections to these.
Okay. Did anyone have anything else we thought we could do for the employees that we might want to add to this?
I can't think of anything specifically, but I do wonder if this might be like a very specific question we could ask department heads.
Yeah,
when
This would be a really good one, because they're the ones that are, when employees leave, they're the ones that hear about what they don't. I mean, actually, I could add another one. I hear a lot of complaints about, wanting the insurance to be better and more affordable, which, I mean, I totally get how complicated that is, but, and maybe that's something we address somewhere else, but the employees think it's really important. I've heard over and over again from several different employees that they'd rather forgo a raise and not have their insurance premiums and stuff messed with. So to me, that speaks volumes. So I don't know if we want to add something in there about insurance. Is that something we want to put here or somewhere else or not at all?
Well, honestly, I feel like you and Administrator Langrick could potentially speak better to that, considering your work with finance and personnel. I really don't understand all of the, I know it's complex. I don't understand all of it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to address what she said, maybe the third bullet, where it's talking about a total benefits program, if instead of just saying fringe benefits, say something to the effect of a competitive or a robust insurance program along those lines.
Can I, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I speak to, so that third bullet point, and Troy, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think what that bullet point is talking about is creating a spreadsheet that actually adds up the total it costs the county for an employee. The reason that's important is that a lot of employees don't think about what we're putting towards their insurance. Like they know how much they have to put to it, but they don't necessarily know how much we put towards it. And so creating a way so that they can see the monetary value that their position, so they know how much they bring home, but they don't know about all the other things we pay, like retirement and fringe and all of those things. So I think that was the point of that bullet. So I think that the insurance, having a good, strong insurance program is potentially separate from that, but maybe I'm wrong. Troy, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, that's right. And I could send you an example of what we do at regional planning. But I draft up a very simple spreadsheet that sums up employer versus employee share benefits, professional development, investment, some other items. We're a very small organization, but organization wide, the total cost of salary and benefits is let's see here. Yeah, the total cost is about 312,000, not counting overhead. So the percentage employees pay is like 7%. So anyhow, I calculate this all out because we're a small organization and struggle with market rate wages as well. It's just a demonstration of our total investment in them. So it's another culture piece, frankly, that demonstrates the total value, not just salary. And I could share what I have, Melissa, if you'd like to send it around. I'd have to de-identify it, but happy to share.
Yeah. So do we think that the insurance piece is a part of that or it's separate?
After hearing what you guys have said, I agree. It probably needs its own emphasis.
Okay. Do we think that that's something we should include in this? Has anyone else? I mean, I've certainly heard it numerous times from employees about wanting better insurance. Am I the only one?
No, I've heard it as well, Melissa.
I'm
Okay.
just wondering, I just don't know if that fits within this particular section. I'm not saying that it isn't something that we need to look at.
Well, in the culture of support, I guess, if we're giving them a better insurance option, isn't that a culture of support? More cost effective? I don't know. I mean, I realize it's actually,
Like I said before, I don't know all of the complex, like how do we even begin this?
Sure.
Yes.
Maybe it could be back up above in improved employee pay and HR policies. Add it there.
well, Mr. Langrick, I mean, I think you put together a group of employees to look into different insurance options, right? And I think the problem is that it's a dismal kind of conversation because it's expensive. And as a county, we can't afford to give the employees a plan that gives them everything they want and no premium, right?
You can, but then it would be a reduction on wages. So then you lead into such discussions as, well, you know, who's going to get the most benefit? Then you kind of run into oralism things of taking care of the folks that are really most in need and are in need of a affordable insurance plan that they're anticipating on being a user of the plan, versus a utilitarianism of, well, wages impacts everybody, and then you have additional wages where you can use that to offset deductibles and increase revenues or increase medications and things like that. So it becomes a weighing of values on, are we looking out to take care of folks that need access to health care and reduce payments, or are we looking out for everybody? And you know, those are hard discussions. The reality is right now as a group, we're a heavier user group. As we found out through our courts insurance, our MLR rate was at 118, 114. So we know right now that we're not paying enough premiums to cover our costs. There is talks of rejoining with the ETF pool and then trying to see if the ETF pool helps cover those different costs. And then we do have some small levers on our end on how we manage that with an employer-employee percentage share. So there's different things like that. But the reality is between, as a group, our user costs and the increased cost of medical care, it's going to be a challenge to have that Cadillac plan that that was in place for public employers 10 years ago.
So, Mr. Administrator Langreich, do you feel that belongs in this document somewhere? And where, if so?
Well, I think it's kind of the total benefits program is kind of where I see that line when you're talking about health insurance. So it's a conversation I plan on having early in the first quarter next year. The first point of it being of, is it in the best interest of the county, again, to consider entering with an ETF plan? And if not that, then to evaluate again our what broker we want to work through and what plan design we want to work through and what carrier we want to work through, what cost, and do we want to, it becomes a balance of, do you want to invest more into wages and salaries that impact everybody, or do you want to invest more into health insurance, which is a benefit potentially to those that are first participating as a member and then those that are in need of payment for it. Other types of things that we can still maneuver on as different types of plans. But I mean, overall, if you wanted in your strategic plan of an item in there, I would say then we kind of defer back what we did with the other ones of having an evaluate and implement kind of an approach versus making a promise of trying to have more affordable and then also trying to then match that up with our expectations of increasing and reaching market prices on compensations. That might be a taller order than you might be able to finance.
Leave the word maybe maintain, maintain a total benefits program for employees. Just put the word maintain in there, and then we do have a benefits program now. We want the word create in there. If we maintain, that means maintain and evaluate, kind of like Administrator was saying. I think it's already there when we're talking about the health total benefits program, but somehow we want to maintain, we don't really want to go backwards, but somehow it's got to be evaluated. Okay, are you willing to, you want less premiums, and how are we going to do what we just set up above, maintain market share of salaries? And yeah, it's going to be a struggle.
Should I just put a bullet point that says evaluate insurance options? And because I know this is something that is important to our employees, and so it should at least be on here for us to not to talk about it every year and determine. I mean, it is really complicated, and we may or may not be able to come up with some perfect
I would say
option.
it's fair to evaluate and maintain a competitive health insurance package is, I think, something that's fair and appropriate.
Okay, let's just add that as an extra bullet point then.
Evaluate and
I think-
maintain a what? A competitive insurance program?
Yes, yep.
Got it. That sounds good. Okay,
All right, I think that brings us to the end of that section, and I'm gonna stop us there unless someone has objections, because we have a couple things to discuss, and I want to get us out of here at 5:30. Thank you, by the way, Supervisor Luck, for taking notes on all of this
no
and
problem.
all your work that you're putting into editing. So since we already mentioned we're gonna move those discussions of the further items, we'll move down to number 11 on our agenda, which is future agenda items. I think we've got a lot on our agenda as it is right now, but does anybody have anything they would want to see added? Okay, then I'd also like to discuss our next meeting date while we're here. Particularly for you, Supervisor Williamson. How did this meeting time work for you?
Well, other than the lawnmower breaking down at home, wasn't too bad. This is better, yes.
Okay.
That's calendar now.
Other committee members, I know Administrator Langrek did mention if we ever wanted Chair Brewer's inputs or ability to be here, does run into his bus service time. So I don't know, we're gonna add that in as a weighing point.
Is that every evening? Administrator?
Yeah, I believe he does that every day, correct, Administrator Langrek?
Yep, I think Marty picks up a bus route at 3 o'clock, and then I think he's typically on until 4:30, 5 o'clock before he's done with his route.
I mean, the only other option would be to do an evening meeting, but I don't know if anybody would be thrilled about that. Because you work every day, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I was speaking to Supervisor Williamson.
Until about November, then I'll be off on Fridays. You know, like, are you thinking 2 weeks again?
I was, yes, so that would put us at,
That last week of September is nice because we don't have any committee meetings.
Administrator Langer, are you going to the WCA meeting and is it over by Wednesday afternoon?
I plan on going, and it's done sometime on Wednesday. No, I'm sorry, it's done on Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm going
Yep.
too. I
Noon on
thought it was done
Tuesday.
on Tuesday.
If you meet in the evening, if you can do it by WebEx only and not have an in-person, it's easier for MIS staff because I'll be frank, I can do it from my home and record and make sure everything gets done instead of having to have a staff member present.
right, yeah, and I think we had discussed that before as far as evening meetings. But are we liking this time? I mean, I'm fine with this time.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with 3:30 too, because on Wednesdays, usually around 6:30, then I have another meeting to go to every Wednesday, so.
Okay, I see Steve Carroll nodding his head. Administrator Langrek and Troy, any thoughts from either of you? Your input is valuable.
I will do my very best to make what time you folks arrive at work.
My afternoons are free, save for the 29th. I'm booked in the evening, but otherwise it looks good.
Well, then that kind of brings us back to this time on the Wednesday, the 29th. So Wednesday, the 29th at 3:30?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We'll plan on that. All right, so then that brings us to item number 12, adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Well, second.
All right, we have a motion by Caro, second by Williamson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you all.
Enjoy the weather.